Joining us now is Brigitte Morten, who's a director at law firm Franks Ogilvie. Really great to have you with us, Brigitte. And it's fascinating when you compare 2017 and 2020. As you say, this is much more of an issues-driven campaign and election that we've seen.
Yes, absolutely. It's much more policy-driven. The post-COVID period for New Zealand has been really tough and our economy is struggling, and people are feeling that quite significantly with high inflation.
High inflation is a global issue though, and we know that the RBNZ was really at the forefront when it comes to this tightening cycle. There are some signs that inflationary pressures, at least when it comes to food, might be starting to ease. What sort of policies do you think will actually go to the core of addressing, these issues for New Zealanders?
I think significantly that's been one of the big issues for the major parties in particular, is that actually there's no short-term solutions to actually getting inflationary pressures under control. So you see the National, now currently in opposition party, they have been really pushing hard on actually getting the accounts of the government back in track, getting them actually under control and reducing government spending. Where you've seen Labor go a little bit more towards that household budget, trying to cut some of the GST, our goods and services tax, on fruit and vegetables like in the supermarkets. So
if you take a look at polling, we are expecting the Labor Party not to be re-elected, but what that path to government for National Party is going to be really quite interesting, isn't it? Do you have any kind of insight into what sort of, incentives the smaller parties will want to get, what they'll want to get out of this partnership, and how that path, is going to look like? Because there are some concerns that, a hung parliament is not being entirely ruled out at this point.
Yeah, it can't be ruled out entirely because of the minor party roles. For us in New Zealand, our mixed member proportionate system means that a coalition government is almost always necessary to have. So that means that after Saturday night, whilst we might have a party that's got the highest party vote, so National is on track, as you say, to have the highest polling result, it may not mean that they're actually in the best position to actually form government because of the fact that we have to actually negotiate and speak to those minor parties. For those two minor parties that look likely for those discussions, the ACT Party, they're quite closely aligned with National, tend to be sit more to the right, so pushing really hard, I think, on tax and on government spending. For the New Zealand First Party, they're much more of a nationalistic party. So it's actually quite unclear exactly what their bottom lines will be, but a very experienced leader at the head of New Zealand First, so there will no doubt be interesting negotiations.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about what we can expect in terms of issues being diluted once you get a coalition government, and what those two parties, the main contenders right now, actually stand for, and perhaps, as you said, the bottom line.
Well, I think it's really important to recognise in New Zealand that actually both our major parties sit what would be seen as probably traditionally on the left of centre when you look at across a world spectrum. So both of them are still doing quite market interventionist type policies, but the key differentiation, I think, between the two policies is about government spending and about tax. And that's where you've seen a lot of the discussion happen. So in terms of diluting, let's say, some of those policies into negotiations, I think on the right, so if you look at the right bloc, National, ACT and possibly New Zealand First, it's unlikely that those two issues will change. However, on the left, if you're looking at a Labour, Greens, Te Pāti Māori, possibly New Zealand First again, type coalition, that's really up for grabs because those parties are really pushing for a significant increase in government spending, whereas the Labour government has realised that they do need to trim their sails a bit.
And I know that you're a big fan of focus on policy, not personality, and I find that really intriguing because without mandatory voting, does that necessarily get turnout?
Absolutely, so that's really interesting, and this is actually looking like it's going to be a low turnout election. I think for most people, though, we've had particularly a very popular leader, our former Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, was very much about personality, and that's what she got a lot of people behind her on. But I think people now are really seeing that actually they need some actual policies and some things to change for their own households to get better. That's why policy has actually become much more in the forefront of this election than previously. And of course, we just can't ignore the fact that we've got two leaders, most likely Prime Minister in this coming after Saturday is going to be called Chris no matter what.